For thousands of years, plague, superstition, and murder have drenched Britain and Ireland with blood and misery. Those dark memories still haunt our ancient lands. That's why we call them the Spooky Isles.
Hello and welcome to the Spooky Isles. My name's David Saunderson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the writer, occultist, and expert on everything spooky, John Kanako James. Good evening, John. How are you tonight?
I'm very good. How are you, David?
Well, I'm not feeling all that well this evening. I'm, a little bit yuck inside, but it's actually great that we've got a great raconteur here with us this evening who can do all the talking for me. Anthony M.R. Lewis is a good friend of ours. He's a tour guide, amateur historian, and one would say urban adventurist here in London. He's the mad mind behind the amazing Lost Valley of London, which he'll tell us about later. And interestingly enough, he's a former tour guide partner of yours, John Kanako James. You both started the famous ghost tour company Boo Tours here in London. So what we've got here is almost a spooky Lennon and McCartney kind of reunion without all the animosity. Anyway, thanks for joining us tonight, Anthony.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure.
Now, tonight we've asked you to come in to talk about your favourite spooky subject, Black Shuck and Other Black Dogs.
Oh, yes, my favourite ghost.
Well, could you actually tell us, our spooky listeners, those who don't know, what is a black dog?
Well, a black dog is a particularly British phenomenon, although records of hellhounds seem to exist all over the world. Ancient Egypt, around Scandinavia, around Wales and Scotland. But the black dogs of England are the ones that really freak the living daylights out of me. And for centuries they've been an omen of death, terror and destruction. They roam the countryside, usually lonely country roads, and if you see one, even for just a glimpse in the distance, it's considered an omen of death and you will die within the year. Although recently they've become a force of protection for many travellers as well, so their legend continues to evolve.
So what are they? Are they ghosts? Are they demons? What are they?
Technically, I guess, would be cryptids. I always hear them mentioned and research them in books of ghosts, but they seem to be very physical, hands-on creatures, particularly with the most famous example, Black Shuck. So they'll probably categorize them as demons or revenants.
Revenants is a good one. The thing is, we have this very sort of M.R. James, very post-Victorian view of what a ghost is. A ghost is a non-physical creature. It can drive us mad. It can trick us into jumping off something and dying. It can't kill us physically. But the black dogs have much more medieval roots. And so they go back to the English revenant, like you find in the Bylands manuscript. Again, weirdly discovered by M.R. James. But they're very physical. That's their medieval roots showing. That they are entirely physical. A medieval revenant can look like an animal. It can tear your head off and still be a spirit of a dead person. They've got very Scandinavian roots in that way.
That's one of the reasons Black Shuck is so disturbing to me, and why the idea of it frightens so much. As John was saying, a ghost isn't supposed to actually get in there with its teeth and claws and start slaying people actively. And I think that's one of the things that makes the legend so terrifying and creepy.
Can you actually maybe tell us about Black Shuck? Because Black Shuck is actually a character, it's not just a specific type of dog, it's actually a specific individual monster type thing. Tell us about Black Shuck.
Well, Black Shuck is particularly famous as the black dog which haunts East Anglia, particularly Norfolk and Suffolk. Often seen on the coast of Norfolk, dashing between Cromer and Great Yarmouth, and it's particularly famous, Black Shuck, for an incident in 1577, where it broke into a pair of churches and created absolute havoc. And it probably is the most famous of the black dogs, and it stands as one of the most feared entities in British folklore.
Can you tell us a bit about that, the church?
Yeah. That's definitely the most famous of Black Shuck's hauntings. It was the 4th of August, 1577. It was late afternoon, about 2 or 3 o'clock, and in the village of Bungay in Suffolk, there was an almighty storm came out of nowhere. The sky turned almost pitch black. Hail absolutely pelted down. Thunder and lightning was directly over the town, and the lightning was hitting the ground. And the congregation in Bungay were terrified, so they were huddled in the church there, and the priest was preaching hellfire and brimstone, and it was St Mary's Church, Bungay, and all of a sudden, the rector decided that everything was going to flood because the rainwater was filling up all the guttering. So decided, I don't know why he made this decision, but in the middle of the storm, to head out and to check all the guttering and clear everything out. Suddenly there was an almighty flash of lightning, huge thunderclap, and there was a sickening thud and a squelch as the bell that was tolling, there were 2 bell ringers up in the belfry, suddenly stopped dead. The rector skidded off the roof and landed outside with a squelch, and then the great doors to St Mary's flew open, and standing there was a huge black hound, Black Shuck, the size of a pony, pretty much 7 feet tall at the shoulder, and it raced down the aisle and began killing the parishioners. And there was the famous rhyme immortalizes it. It was all down the church in the midst of fire, the hellish monster flew, and passing onward to the choir, he many people slew. There were 2 parishioners knelt in prayer, and famously, when Black Shuck pelted down the aisle between them, it, with a flick of his jaws, wrung both their necks in one instant, and another parishioner who was kneeling in prayer apparently got such a gripe on the back that he was shriveled like a drawn purse, although he survived afterwards, but by all accounts was a babbling idiot for the rest of his days. The ordeal just drove him mad. And things didn't stop there. Directly after the attack on St Mary's, Bungay, he pelted 12 miles away to Blythburgh with the Church of the Holy Trinity, the Church of the Marshes, on a patch of high ground overlooking the fens, and this time leapt to the roof, smashed into the west tower, knocked the steeple clean off, which crashed through the roof of the church, damaging the sculpted angels and the font, and ran along the beam of the church roof, terrifying the parishioners there, killed more people, at least 2 people, a man and a lad, and then exited by crashing out the north door into the swamp north of the church. And when that door eventually was cleaned, there was quite obviously seen 3 claw marks they call the devil's fingerprints. And I've been to the Holy Trinity Church and I've seen them there, etched into the church door to this day.
What do they look like?
There's 3 of them, very thick and black, etched into the church door. So 3 black scorch marks in the church door.
Okay. And where is this again? Remind people where this is.
Blythburgh.
Blythburgh.
In Suffolk, East Anglia.
Okay.
So that's the fens, very low ground, lots of marshes and bogs, and mist rolls in, which is part of what gives that area such a spooky atmosphere.
And you went there specifically to see these marks, did you?
Well, yes, and to hunt down Black Shuck. To me, the story with him began with as many things do in my life, with the Usborne World of the Unknown. As a series of books by Usborne Publishing. It was in the libraries when I was growing up in primary school. Very sought after by all the kids at school. There were 3 of them. Usborne Book of UFOs, Book of Monsters, and Book of Ghosts. And they were sought after.
I can recall them, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
I think there was lots of books of those
essential reading for every child. Yeah. And in that order they were sought after. There were many copies of the UFO book, but kids were always vying to get the Book of Monsters, and Ghosts was the holy grail. And finally the school bought a copy, and all the kids were fighting over themselves to get hold of it, to take it out of the library and read it. And I remember leafing through it. It was all very scary. I was very easily spooked as a child. And the centre 2 pages was this horrific, full 2-page painting of Black Shuck, literally leaping out of the 2-dimensional restrictions of the book, leaping out at the viewer. Absolutely terrifying. I've got a digital copy of it. I'm going to give it to you to add to the show notes on the Spooky Owls webpage that will accompany the podcast, so you can see it.
It's very educational now, isn't it? Our podcast. We have study notes.
Study notes. I've got some photos from my Bungay and Blythburgh trip as well.
Good.
I'll add all those so you can add them to the webpage. But this painting scared the bejesus out of me. Just leaping out of the book at you, frothing at the jaws. Like many depictions of Black Shuck, it had a single cyclopean eye, like a cyclops, smack bang in the middle of its forehead. Many depictions of Black Shuck have only a single eye. And what made it worse was the very matter-of-fact text. One of the ghostly dogs pictured here is known as Black Shuck, which haunts East Anglia. And as a kid, you're hoping for reassurance that this kind of thing isn't real. So almost being like a textbook is just like saying, yeah, if you go to East Anglia, you'll run into this thing. And for me, that became the symbol of all childhood fear. That gave me the fear of the dark, what sparked my lifelong interest in ghosts and the supernatural. You're fascinated by what you're scared by. You want to kind of gain control of it. And I thought, when I finally came to England at and I reached the grand old age of not 30, I decided it was high time I went to the root of my childhood fear and what I think is spooky and go to the haunting grounds of Black Shuck, to Bungay and Blythburgh, the most celebrated locations where he made his attacks, and learn more about it and to discover these places for myself. And I discovered lots of wonderful architecture at the same time, beautiful scenery, and this fascinating folklore, because the great thing about Black Shuck, the legend, encompasses so many amazing things in English history. 1066, the Battle of Hastings, Thomas à Becket, the sinking of the White Ship on the coast of Normandy. You can make an epic action film about this character because he encapsulates so many amazing things. So from this spooky thing that captured my imagination as a kid, and as kids love frightening things, it piqued my interest in all things historical, legend, folklore, all the things that make spooky Isles, spooky England so fascinating for us all. So it's been a real fantastic trip. It really has been.
Just one thing I thought there, if people are recognising Anthony's voice, he's actually the introduction to the Spooky Isles at the start and the end of these podcasts. I should have said that earlier, but it was just then when he said the word Spooky Isles, I thought,
Spooky Isles.
Hey, I remember that voice. That's the bloke who does our intro, and he does it very spookily as well.
Absolutely. He's also a professional voiceover artist, so you might also have heard him in adverts and that sort of thing as well.
Yes. So, John, you wrote an article for Spooky Isles, I think last year or the year before, about hounds.
Ah, yes.
Are they the same thing as Black Shuck?
Now, arguably they are. They are from slightly different areas. Black Shuck is very much the southeast. Hounds are West Country and Lancashire up north. And they're very slightly different. In some versions of the myth with Hounds, they hunt the spirits of unbaptized babies over the moors. In other versions of the stories, they are the ghost of unbaptized babies who somehow metamorphose into the Hounds. And it's part of the big fear that medieval folk had of dying incorrectly. The good death was a very big deal in the medieval period. Dying properly shriven, dying with all your affairs in order. And a lot of the medieval ghost stories, like in the Bylands manuscript, a lot of them come down to somebody who died improperly. And that alone is a reason why somebody can end up as a ghost. I just want to say, by the way, one of the other reasons I love Black Shuck and a lot of other English revenants is the bizarreness factor. Because Black Shuck is a big cyclopean black hound.
It's that weirdness, isn't
yes,
it?
Absolutely. And the reason I love it is because that is the tip of the weird iceberg for English ghost stories. In the Bylands manuscript, you have a ghost that appears as a whirlwind of straw with a glowing light in the middle, and then becomes, I think, a two-headed raven, and then becomes a rolling bale of hay. You have another type of spirit that can appear as four men holding a sack. Another spirit from Yorkshire that's associated with the Bylands manuscript appears as a bull, but its head is just a featureless sort of black furred lump with no external orifices. And there's another ghost, which is really strange, because it is the ghost of that looks like a human, but it's actually a different human. And it's like, oh yes, the Bishop of so-and-so, who now appears as a hunter of the horn, and doesn't look anything like himself. So that's one of the reasons I love the bizarreness factor of English ghosts. One other thing I'd like to say about the story of Bungay and Blythburgh is that I do a lot of research into witchcraft. I'm writing a book about witchcraft at the moment. And it is the only example of one particular facet of witchcraft that you see on the continent that you don't get here. And the Black Shuck story is this one tiny echo of that continental tradition, because you have all the people crowding into the church during a storm during the day to get away from a storm, and they are ringing the bells of the church. And that is something you get in Germany especially, and also in France. And that is a way, church bell ringing, and we know they did it in Britain, because it's remarked upon in diary accounts and chronicles. They did it to drive away evil spirits, and they did it to sort of drive away black magic that was attacking the community. And so the idea that they all ran into the church to have the bells rung when the storm came over, they already thought they were going to see a dark spirit. They already believed they were under attack. And I might be wrong, but that's the only place I've seen any echo of that continental tradition in Britain, is with that example of them running into the church. It was done during Halloween as well.
Do you think that's a Saxon thing, maybe? Or
It may well be. It may well be. And they're very near the coast, so it's possible there's a bit of continental influence
what does
coming over
what does
directly.
black shuck actually mean? I know you've told me in the past. What does shuck mean?
It could be two things. It could be the Anglo-Saxon word, the Old English word skooka, which means demon or devil. Or it could come from the local East Anglia parlance, the local dialect, shucky, which means shaggy or hairy. It goes by many other names too, sometimes skriker, barghest, the shug monkey, the moddy-doo.
The shug monkey.
The shug
That
monkey.
sounds like
awesome.
a weird pet name.
You can start calling me Shug Monkey.
It depends what part of England he comes from, but Black Shuck is the East Anglia name for him, either coming from Skooka or Shucky, or the two could become enmeshed over the centuries.
Oh, crumbs, yes, hounds. They have many, many different names, including Yell Hounds, Gabriel Hounds, the Gabriels. They have a lot of different names in their areas as well. But that's how things develop. There's no one central office of folklore that sort of issues a name to each creature.
This creature sounds very familiar with a character in fiction that we all know.
Ah, yes.
Tell us about that one.
The Grim, Sirius Black. That's a wonderful piece of semiotic thickness by J.K. Rowling. She's taken many, many interpretations of the Black Shuck legend. Part of the role of the Black Hounds all over the world, the Hounds of Hell, is they guard the underworld. You know, you've got Cerberus, you've got the Egyptian hellhounds that guard the pharaohs, and some people think that Black Shuck may be a personification of the dog star, Sirius, which traditionally guarded the tombs of pagan kings. So you got Sirius, and then there's Grims, which are various revenants, sometimes humans, sometimes skull-faced phantoms, sometimes animals, that guard churchyards and can be seen looking out of, church towers, sweeping with their eyes across the graveyard to keep an eye and protect all the souls there. So she's taken the Black Dog legends all over the UK, and she's sort of synthesized them to create the character Sirius Black, even down to the fact that he's not actually a harmful figure at all, but a protector. And of course, many modern interpretations of Black Shuck and many modern instances where people have reported to see him, he's taken on a more protective role, padding alongside people as they traverse lonely country roads, especially women and people who may be considered to be vulnerable travellers, to protect them and take on a role of guardian.
And can I say, that is actually a great full circle movement for the myth. Because if you go into pre-Christian North European sagas, you very often have a man or woman who has the power to project themselves as this animal creature. Wolves, black dogs, ravens. I think I mentioned this a little bit in the last podcast, actually. And they are a kind of shamanistic protector. And so it's a lovely full circle movement, because of course they got demonized and turned into things like werewolves during the sort of rewriting of things in the Christian era. And now it's coming all the way back around, and they get to be the good guys again.
I just saw a bit funny, because I actually wasn't talking about Harry Potter. I was talking about a much more famous, in my mind.
Yeah.
Gamork? Are you talking about the never-ending story?
No, we're not talking about that. We're going even more famous than that. We're talking
Which one?
Arthur Conan Doyle, the Hound of the Baskervilles.
Ah, yes.
Because
What?
you've not heard of that before?
Refresh my memory.
Yes, you have a point there, actually.
I think so. We're going through all these other things, and I think there's a much more famous black dog that's, and that's... It's all through English history.
Oh, yes. That was, yes, definitely Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He returned from Africa in 1901, and he was suffering from enteric fever, and so he was staying in Norfolk. in Cromer Hall, and that's where he first heard the legends, the local legends.
And you went down. Is it the place you went down? Is it with the crosses or something? That's Cromer Hall, or is it somewhere? Have you been there?
I haven't been to Cromer Hall yet. No.
Okay,
No, that's next on my Black Shuck list. No, I went to Bungay and Blytheborough, the Suffolk version of the legends. But while he was at Cromer Hall, he was fascinated by the local folklore. So he took a lot of that inspiration to create the Black Shuck legend. Of course, he set it to Dartmoor, which has also got many.
That's very much Yeth Hounds, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
Yeth
It's
Hounds.
very much Yeth Hounds, and so. But that's the thing about particularly England. I don't know so much about them in Wales, but I don't know as much about Welsh folklore as I should. My studies have always been medieval England, but almost anywhere in Britain you'll find black dogs somewhere. They are, for some reason, a really intrinsic part of our psyche.
Well, they're actually here in London, aren't they? Because I mean, you've told me stories in the past of some strange
Cornhill.
type of thing. Tell us about that, Anthony.
That was an almost identical occurrence to what happened in East Anglia in 1577. It was St. Peter's Cornhill, and again, during a violent thunderstorm, there was a huge crackle of thunder, and lightning struck the steeple, and materialising inside the church was a fantastically huge black hound. And in that case, all the parishioners bolted for the door and got out because, unlike many other accounts, it actually materialised straight inside rather than bursting in through the door. And they say there are claw marks were left inside the church almost an inch deep.
So you've got the very similar stories as John said. They go sort of all the way from Germany all the way through here. So
a curious way of appearing.
Oh, yes.
Consistent.
what do you think they are? Like, having all said this, believing they are, beasts of hell, what do we actually think they are?
Interestingly, John Stowe mentions the two incidents in one breath in his contribution to Holland's Head's Chronicle. And he has this entry where he describes the Bungay and Blytheborough one, and he doesn't go into the supernatural element. What he says is, lightning struck a church in Bungay and Blytheborough, and he lists the damage, and he lists the injuries. And then he says, and 10 years ago, my father reports that on Cornhill, lightning struck a church and did something similar.
Ooh. I think that's pretty much nailed it. Obviously it must be lightning strikes. Even some of the injuries that were reported to happen seem to be electrocution or burns. The gentleman who got shriveled up like a drawn purse has obviously been electrocuted by something. Both men's necks were running in an instant. It describes the behaviour of two people being hit by a lightning strike and jerking backwards. They think it might even be ball lightning because, of course, people say something, unexplained that are going to terrify people materialising inside a church could be the phenomena of ball lightning, which is almost like a fireball rolling down the aisle. Could be consistent with the legends. Curiously, the thing that supports this theory is in the church records, the parish records of the events that happened at Blytheborough and Bungay don't actually mention the black dog at all. They call it the hateful thing. And the Black Shuck legend only got folded into it later that year when Reverend Abraham Fleming, who was living in London at the time, published a pamphlet all about it called A Strange and Terrible Wonder. He decided to use it as a warning for people. He was saying it was basically an alarm bell rung by the Lord basically with...
Oh yes, it's very moralistic, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've both separately seen the British Library's copy from the time.
The pamphlet. It's a little octavo. It's a dinky little thing, and we both researched it at the British Library. And he basically comes out in the first in the preface, basically saying, among men it is grown and custom to have forewarnings of afterclaps as beacons, built upon hills which are then set on fire when danger is imminent and at hand. Alarm bells serving to the same purpose, and other inventions of men proceeding and provided of policy to prevent or else to prepare. So basically, it's basically he was saying the devil and the Lord had conceived of this as warnings to mortal folk, and so he thought that was an excellent way to keep people on their toes, to make sure they keep a moral life, or otherwise things like this may happen, and decided to fold in the local folklore of the Black Dogs all around East Anglia, which were already in place by that point, into those events that happened. So he basically added Black Shuck to the mix to make that story extra potent.
So really, they were sort of almost boogeymen to scare grown-ups as opposed to kiddies.
Very
That's right.
much so. Very much so. By the way, interestingly, Ant and I both have slightly different ending of Black Shuck related stories, because you were telling me about something that was found from 1577, weren't you?
Oh, yes. Yes, they... basically, on the 14th of May this year, 2014, there were the Dig Ventures archaeology team. They were in Suffolk, and they were in the Leiston Abbey. It's about a few miles from Bungay, and they were doing work, excavating the abbey, and 20 inches under the ground, very shallow grave, they found the skeleton of a 7-foot-long hound. Again, I'll give you a photograph.
7 foot long.
7 foot long.
Yes, that is...
That's a big dog.
That's a big
Yeah.
dog.
That's bigger than a lion.
It's
Isn't
like a
it?
mastiff.
Yes,
yeah.
that's pretty damn big.
Bred, definitely bred for
And
bred
this is
for
a real
combat.
thing. This is something
It's a
they've
real
found.
thing. They
Yeah.
This
found
is
it.
not. This is not from an old book that says we found this. This is
It's right there
Yeah.
this year. And get this is the scary thing. They found fragments of pottery on the same layer as the bones, so dating from the same time.
so it ain't a
They've-
dinosaur.
No, it ain't a dinosaur.
exactly.
They've dated the pottery to approximately 1577.
Ah, yes.
So this could be the
Yeah.
skeleton of the actual dog which terrorized those churches.
That would be awesome.
That would be amazing. However, I found a few months ago another Black Shuck ending story. I found it in a collection of Cambridgeshire folklore that was in the magazine Folklore. And it's the story from about 1921, I seem to remember, of a landowner who owned a stretch of road that was said to be haunted by Black Shuck. And he took over the land, and he was trying to arrange for his men to go down and do a bit of marsh drainage, which in Cambridgeshire was a very hot topic for a long time. And they were like, oh no, we can't do that. And he was like, well, why? And he said, oh, well, that's haunted by the Shucker. The Black Shuck, the dog. And so he's a little skeptic. He's like, really? What does this dog look like? And they're like, oh, it's a big black dog. And then the landlord says, oh, so it's a big black dog, yes. And it's got one big red eye, yes, yes. And it's got lightning crackling around it, yes, yes, yes. Oh, God, I was wondering what that was. And they're like, what do you mean? Oh, well, I hit it with my car. And to which they were like, what? Oh, yeah, look, I'm really sorry. It just came out of nowhere. It appeared in the middle of the road. I hit it full speed in my motor car. I'm afraid the poor thing didn't stand a chance. And so that is his story of the death of Black Shuck. And ever since that story, has the road has been said not to be haunted. 1921.
Oh, okay.
Early years of the motor car.
This has been quite depressing, really. We've started off with this fearsome thing that was scaring little Anthony at school with his Osborne books, and now we've basically killed them off, and we've got cemetery and stuff, and it's like, you know. Anthony, give us a Black Shuck story to finish it off. You must have something.
Well, I'll give you the unofficial legend, but the one I find most irresistible, which basically rolls a lot of English folklore and myth into one irresistible package for me, which is all beginning with, as many things are, 1066 and all that, the Battle of Hastings and the establishment of William the Conqueror. After he was victorious in battle, he split England up amongst his lieutenants. And the wealthy lands of East Anglia went to one of the greatest heroes of his side, which was Roger Bygod, who started very poor in life, but has now risen to some acclaim. He got Norfolk and Suffolk, and he was going to leave it to his good son, William Bygod. Unfortunately, William Bygod died when the white ship sank in 1120, and everything went to the other son, the good-for-nothing son, Hugh Bygod the Restless. Now, whether Roger Bygod was a very good lord of East Anglia, ruling by example, very fair and just amongst the Anglo-Saxon serfs, Hugh Bygod went the other way, terrorizing the local population in basically ruling with an iron fist, kidnapping, imprisoning, and slaying the elders of villages that didn't toe the line, and in some cases burning villages to the ground entirely. All the Anglo-Saxon serfs began calling him Old Skooker, the Demon. Eventually, he got so big for his boots He was joining every rebellion that was going. He joined forces with the Crown Prince Henry the young king, against the actual king, his father, King Henry II. And King Henry II raised a vast superior force and basically defeated Hugh Bygod's forces at Framlingham Castle in Suffolk, which was the family seat of power. In fact, Hugh Bygod was to lament he wasn't at Bungay, where his Bungay Castle was, a much more utilitarian fortress, which that would have resisted attack far more easily. But he had lost. He avoided being executed for treason by agreeing to become a knight-errant and attempting a holy pilgrimage to the Middle East. And that is the last we ever heard of Hugh Bygod on this physical plane. They lost contact with him in Palestine, presumably, according to legend, riddled with arrows. And unfortunately, he was not to ascend to heaven because our old friend Thomas à Becket had him excommunicated while he was away, absolutely fed up with his antics.
Dying improperly, classical English revenant.
There we go. And ever since then, at Bungay Castle, a young serving boy was cleaning up, and shortly after the death of Hugh Bygod, suddenly came face to face with such a hound of hell as God forbid should ever be on his heels. And from that moment onwards, the strange demon, the Shuck dog, was seen all over Suffolk and Norfolk, still performing the same bloody deeds he did in life, still spreading terror and distress to all that encounter it. And that's where we get the famous myth that if you are even to clap eyes on Black Shuck, within a year you'd be dead. And the implication there is the reason you'd be dead is because he's going to come and get you. Yeah,
yes,
very hands-on. And so yes, that is the ghost of Hugh Bygod, apparently, a revenant.
And would you say he's the original Black Shuck?
I think with a legend like that, yes, I'd very much like to think that is the source of the legend, because I think so many historic characters, so many amazing cinematic incidents that happen throughout history, all collapsed into one mythology, makes it irresistible to me. So yes, I say that is Black Shuck.
We're running out of time, but I know, John, you're going to give me one last thing to give some last bit of hope that Black Shuck still is out there stalking us. What is it?
Yes, Black Shuck is out there because as recently as 1975, he was seen by an RAF officer in Norfolk running on the beach at night. And as we exit, Anthony, one question. There is a village that Black Shuck dropped into the sea with lightning, isn't there? Do you know the name of it? If you don't, it's okay.
He doesn't know. Keep going.
It don't. But the story goes that somewhere, to be honest, it's probably been said about 5 different villages. Somewhere on the southeast coast of England, there is a village where half of it dropped into the sea after being struck by lightning, and that is the doing of Black Shuck. So there he is.
That was in 1975.
Oh no, that wasn't 1975.
Oh,
that
what was the 1975 one you were saying?
Oh, he was seen on the beach by an RAF officer.
Oh, okay.
But there we go, Black Shuck, kids. He won't just kill you; he'll kill your whole town.
Good stuff. All right. Anyway, we've got to leave it there. We're getting late for time.
Yes.
But I'd like to thank our guest here tonight, Anthony M.R. Lewis. He is the head or the face of
The Lost Valley of London.
Give us the web address for
That's www.lostvalleyoflondon.com, and I've lots of adventures I've made there where you can follow me and meet dinosaurs and pirates and ghosts.
And that's all video, and they're fantastic. I've even appeared in the background, so you can even see me as a pirate if you like. Now, I believe at some stage you may well be doing a Black Shuck video.
That's right. I plan to go beyond the Lost Valley, and I can't think of any thing I'd rather do to start off with than this legend of Black Shuck, and incorporate all the famous characters from history in there as well.
All right. Well, thank you for coming today, Anthony. As always, thank you, John. Thank you,
pleasure.
everyone. We'll be back next time. This is David Saunderson for the Spooky Isles. Good evening.
You have been listening to The Spooky Isles, hosted by David Saunderson and John Canico James with assistance from Lorcan Maguire. You can visit the Spooky Isles website for more tales of ghosts, horror, and dark history in the UK and Ireland at spookyisles.com. This is Anthony M.R. Lewis speaking.